welcome, Magda, to this My Broadband What Next question and answer session with myself, Aki Anastasiou. Lovely to have you with us. COVID-19 is something that has taken the entire world by surprise. I'm sure in your particular sector, and especially in investing, you must be seeing things very, very differently. Tell us how the pandemic has affected you personally and how your organization, Sygnia, operates.
Aki, so thank you for inviting me. So in terms of the pandemic, I think, it came as a shock to the system, to everybody worldwide. And I remember those whirlwind first 2 weeks where suddenly, you had to literally dust off the disaster recovery plans and go into the extreme version of the disaster recovery plan live, which of course was never designed to be one where, all your sites are off limits and everyone works from home. I mean, that was never envisaged as a disaster. We've always had 3 different sites where we could move people and so on. So I think for those first 2 weeks, we obviously didn't sleep as an exco. We just planned. And it was everything from looking at our vulnerable staff to, those using public transport, to how are we going to get everyone equipped with a laptop? How do we source all the laptops that we didn't have? But somehow we lived through those 2 weeks and, emerged out of it with about 70% of our staff working from home. We are declared an essential service because we process payments. So that was fortunate. So we never really had to close the office. But obviously we just let as many of our staff members as we could work from home. Which means that, we kind of ran on skeleton crew within Sygnia. But there have been positives and negatives. I mean, it's actually been amazingly easy. I thought that there would be more problems with having people work from home. Turns out not at all. Some people have become a lot more productive. No one is missing in action while looking after the kids. So that's, positive. And I think, what will emerge on the other side is that, we will relook, and we're already considering it, at how we work in future. So certainly we will not go back to having everyone in the office. We will look at flexible working hours, working from home, and client engagements. We've had to reinvent the virtual way of engaging with clients, but that has proved to be incredibly effective. People have more time. People can dedicate more time to kind of one-on-one conversations. So, bar everything else, I think, we really are, and it's a terrible thing to say, given that so many other businesses are struggling. We actually, as Sygnia, have, it's business as usual, or unusual, but it's business.
It's extraordinary. It's incredible the way you talk. I mean, most of the CEOs and companies that I speak to, if you ask them before the lockdown, what they were about to do, they would have said it was impossible to do. The impossible became possible, and this is the new normal. And I think a lot of company leaders are asking themselves, "Oh, what else is impossible that we haven't been able to achieve?" So we're certainly living in a very interesting world. I mean, you've seen the markets are doing crazy things at the moment, and we're kind of driven and controlled by a virus right now. Now, one of Sygnia's shareholdings is 16% in the Oxford Sciences Innovation, OCI. They've certainly been making a lot of headlines in the last few weeks as one of the companies that's kind of at the forefront of developing this vaccine. Can you share anything from us, from Oxford University, what that potential of that vaccine looks like and how that investment is going for you? It's really fascinating to watch from the outside.
Well, it's a fascinating investment. And when we made that investment in Oxford, and Oxford Sciences Innovation is basically a very unique business model. It's a company that was founded by a group of large asset managers in the UK. They approached Oxford University. They said to Oxford in 2015, you guys have, all the IP, world-class IP, number 1 research university in the world, number 1 in medical, particularly medical research and artificial intelligence, and yet you guys are not commercializing any of that IP. So how about we set up this company, Oxford Sciences Innovation? We, as asset managers, put in £600 million. We will set up this whole team and infrastructure to commercialize all the IP on an exclusive basis that emerges out of Oxford. And that really is what happened. And since 2015, they've managed to commercialize and actually just set up 80 different companies. One of them is Vasitech, which owns the IP to the Oxford vaccine project. That used to be a very closed club in terms of shareholding in OSI. So you couldn't buy those shares. You still can't buy those shares in the open market in any shape, size, or form, because it was always held very tightly. But there were some large active asset managers who were participants in this, who came under huge stress last year, poor performance, outflows to passive investment strategies. And, I approached those asset managers. They happened to have the shareholding in OSI. And I said to them, guys, you actually have no choice, but you need to start disinvesting from some of your shares. Can I buy your OSI shareholding? So that's how Sygnia became a shareholder in OSI. And then I built up that stake we are now the largest investor in OSI.
That's fascinating.
And, but obviously I didn't envisage I just thought it was a phenomenal investment. Can you go wrong buying, the IP of Oxford University in perpetuity? It seemed like a no-brainer. But now with the Oxford vaccine, so Vasitech, which is one of the spin-outs, has been working on a number of different vaccines, including one for MERS, which is what gave them the head start on. So they've already developed technology that they would deploy. It was now an issue of adjusting it for the coronavirus, of COVID-19 virus. And that gave them heck of a head start in terms of technology, in terms of having the platform to develop the vaccine. And so they were able to move into what's called phase 2 trials very quickly. And phase 2 trials is human trials on a big scale. And they are currently testing that vaccine in UK, US, Brazil, and South Africa, in Johannesburg.
Wow.
Because, I've learned a lot about vaccines in the last couple of months, but testing of a vaccine relies obviously on the fact that you take, say, 10,000 people, you inject 5,000 with the vaccine, 5,000 with a placebo, but then you have to have sufficient number of infections in the general population for those people to naturally come into contact with the virus, because you can't expose them to the virus directly just in case they drop dead, It has to happen naturally. So in the UK, that kind of general rate of infection has started dropping, whereas in Brazil and in South Africa, it's on the rise. So we are the perfect countries to test. And hopefully that means that we also are at the forefront of the queue for getting the vaccine, because, there is the actual vaccine, creation of it, and there is the manufacturing. And manufacturing must happen via a pharmaceutical company. The UK government has insisted that it must be a UK pharmaceutical company. So AstraZeneca came in as a UK champion.
Yes.
And, they actually place a very, very high probability on that vaccine being successful.
Wow.
But what they have said is it will be an annual shot, so it won't be something like a smallpox once-off vaccine.
Yeah.
This be. And some of the worrying things is that this virus is already starting to change shape in Europe. Not necessarily becoming more virulent, it's just changing, the spikes. And it basically means that, you will have to keep evolving the vaccine over time.
That is so interesting. I mean, and this company is absolutely fascinating listening to the way you've been talking about it. So you certainly have a knack for seeing and spotting good investment opportunities. I mean, I look at your funds and how you're outperforming the big brand asset managers. How on earth do you do it year after year after year? What's the secret of Sygnia that you're outperforming everybody else?
A few things. One is passive management. We track the markets. So, if you look at a balanced portfolio, rather than trying to pretend that whether, MTN is going to outperform versus SEPI versus, Richmond, we actually just buy the markets. But we do it in thematic ways. So it's not just randomly buying the entire all-share index. I mean, certainly for domestic equities, you're more limited, but Internationally, you can buy different indices tracking different sectors, different themes, different geographies. So you really can construct portfolios without focusing on the, individual companies. You can actually construct portfolios by focusing on sectors and themes and macroeconomics. And that is what we've been very, very good at. It has, it always has been our investment philosophy. It's to look at sectors and themes. So for instance, technology, it was a no-brainer 5 years ago to say technology is going to be the dominant theme of the next decade plus. And hence, how do we get exposure to it? And, we launched a fund called Sygnia Fourth Industrial Revolution Fund, which exploited exactly those themes. It's anything from virtual reality, robotics, self-driving cars, platforms, online platforms. Then we spent a lot of time analyzing global macroeconomics because, again, I tend to believe in, I used to work Coronation and African Harvest. Active asset managers in South Africa tend to think South Africa is the world. We don't. We tend to think South Africa is actually fairly irrelevant. What happens to our markets is a function of foreign sentiment. We are a teeny tiny market in the global universe, and money either flows into our market, pushes up our bonds, pushes up our equities, or flows out of our markets.
Right.
And unfortunately, markets do not, and it's very important to know that markets do not necessarily, and in a lot of cases, don't reflect the economic fundamentals as they should. You would think that market performance is a proxy for how the economy is doing. It isn't. It's actually a proxy for sentiment of large investors who either have access to cash or not. And of course, you see in this pandemic when, the US Fed is printing money, when interest rates internationally are at zero and negative. If you are a large investment bank, you can borrow money at zero and you invest it in economies such as South Africa where interest rates are high. So we observe those trends. We look at politics, geopolitics and macroeconomics, and we go, where's the money going?
Well,
and we follow the money.
It's interesting. I mean, you've got the right philosophy there, and that's why you've got so many people smiling at the moment. But if you look at the world at the moment, and I look at the US market and I look at what it did, it's just like a sharp dip in early March. And, the recovery is like almost happened. I mean, I look at the technology shares, which is kind of the backbone of this recovery, which is extraordinary to think that the world at the moment finds itself in such an extraordinary circumstance, such high unemployment, so much uncertainty, yet the markets have bounced back to where they were, driven by technology shares. Can you kind of explain that to us?
Absolutely. So if you look at this disconnect between markets and fundamentals. So fundamentals are terrible. I mean, globally, you've got 40 million unemployed Americans. We've got 30% heading for 50% unemployment rate in South Africa, and you're seeing it all around us. I mean, all you have to do is drive out of your building and you see many more homeless people than you have ever seen before. So it's tragic. And of course, those people are consumers. Now, every economy and every company is driven by consumer spending. Take away all the macroeconomic jargon and it boils down to the consumer spending, buying. That is what drives economic growth. And we, given that everybody in the world is poorer and is feeling poorer and is sitting at home, that spending isn't happening. So the major engine of growth is just not there, and many companies are suffering as a result. But there are sectors that are net beneficiaries of this. So absolutely anything online and auxiliary businesses are benefiting. So, while you're sitting at home, you're ordering your groceries online. So any online platforms, selling platforms, are flying, Amazon being a good example, but it's not just Amazon, it's all the delivery services, courier services, that is benefiting. Anything, you're no longer going to the theater, you're not going to the sports games, the rugby, but what you are doing is you're streaming Netflix. So again, streaming online entertainment is right there. You are not socializing with your friends, but what you are doing is you are gaming. So you're playing games. So anything that provides gaming experiences online is benefiting.
So who are going to be the big losers?
So the big losers are, look, tourism, and anything associated with it is right at the forefront. And obviously that is tragic, particularly in the context of South Africa, where, over 10% of our GDP is tourist related. And within tourism sector, you've got everything from hotels, restaurants, obviously airlines, obviously curio shops, just at the waterfront here in Cape Town. None of the curio shops have opened and they want, so those are the problematic areas. Anything that SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, which because of this lockdown have literally been destroyed financially. So businesses which survive, on a very narrow profit margin, and they depend on monthly cash flows. Large property companies, commercial property companies, because the demand for office space going forward is just not going to be there. So, people will work from home. I've already said to our ExCo team at Sygnia that, guys, we've got to prepare for the fact that 20 to 30% of our staff, even when they can, will not want to come back to work. They will say to us, we're working from home. We're very happy working in our pajamas. We are not putting makeup. We are not sitting in traffic for an hour. Take it or leave it. So, suddenly demand for office space, for office furniture goes down, but demand for data and connectivity goes up. So there are quid pro quos, in the economy. Companies like Microsoft's, Amazon's, Zoom,
So, by the way, I was talking to a psychologist earlier about, people working from home and the psychological impacts that are out there. And the one thing that she stressed is you've got to get into the routine that you had before the lockdown started. So I heard you talking about pajamas there. And she said pajamas are not good for the psychological well-being of ourselves. You need to get up in the morning, into your routine, shower, not necessarily wear a suit and that, but get into clothes and start your work routine and exercise, and it all helps with the healthy mental well-being of ourselves. And I think it's a big challenge. We're all discovering a lot of these things going forward, but you've been very vocal about South African leadership, about the economy in South Africa. And when I look at how this coronavirus has been handled and the restrictions that we've had in place, the precarious situation that our economy finds ourselves right in. We heard the half-term budget yesterday by the finance minister. From your point of view, Magda, as the leader of Sygnia, are you still optimistic about South Africa? And what do we need to do to really unlock the value and come out of this terrible financial mess that we're in?
So it's a very difficult question because, obviously, we are not alone in this crisis. It's a worldwide crisis. So every single country is becoming more internally focused. Every single country is dealing with not dissimilar problems to us, which is, unemployment, mostly, lack of growth, depression, recession. So it's not as if we can turn to others and say, please help. There isn't that much help available, and we've seen it in the budget. Yes. And I think it's a double-edged sword. I think it's a saving grace, thank God, that we cannot borrow more, because I think if they could, they would, and they're borrowing in dollars, and if the rand depreciates, that debt just goes through the roof. So I'm actually quite pleased that, there are borrowing restrictions on South Africa. They can't access more dollars. But the reality of it is, I think, we will have to reinvent the way we think about things such as, procurement. So, and again, there's some positives in being a country like South Africa, where we've got a couple of things going for us. So, look, I did believe that the lockdown was a mistake. My PR firms kept saying, stop talking, you can't, it's now obviously everyone looks back and says, what was the point of killing the economy? I was asking that question right at the beginning. I just said, I didn't think that, and I wasn't alone. I mean, leading developed market economists were saying, what's appropriate in UK, US is not appropriate in emerging markets, but it is what it is. Where we are where we are. The positives for us are that we actually are quite a flexible, resilient nation. And by that, I mean, we've got a very large informal sector economy. And so people who were never formally employed. And they have an amazing ability there's quite a lot of flex between the formal employment and informal employment. So people are used to surviving on very little. As opposed to, in the UK and in the US, where they're not, they're queuing up for their unemployment benefits in giant SUVs. Our population is queuing up, as they have always queued up for teeny tiny amounts of money. So we've got more flex, more adjustable population. You're not seeing social unrest in South Africa. You are seeing social unrest in the US and in the UK. So different reactions and adaptability. The weak rand is actually surprisingly a benefit. We are a net exporter, not importer of products. So obviously our exports benefit. It just becomes a lot cheaper to export.
Right.
It has become a lot more expensive to import. So anything that you want to, bring in from abroad costs more. Benefit of that is we will have to look at domestic suppliers. We will have to look at domestic rand-based procurement, which is an opportunity. It means manufacturing can potentially rise up again, because we will need to start looking at domestic suppliers. And, we are a nation of entrepreneurs. I mean, in South Africa, everyone is an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So if we can channel it correctly, if we can provide sufficient amount of at least startup capital to people who want to start businesses, which can supply the new economy, we could, over time, kind of emerge out of this crisis, in a better position. But it will take a very, very dedicated focus. And my concern about government is, I just participated in the infrastructure conference a few days ago, and, there is me going, guys, move. We need to do things quickly. The private sector is willing to commit capital, but you're going to outlive this goodwill that has been created.
Yeah.
This pandemic. And then you hear the government side of the equation, which is, well, we've got this process to go through, this process, and then that paperwork and this red tape, and you just go, okay.
Frustrating, but I do hear you're optimistic at the same time. In between all of that, there's clearly a lot of work we need to do. And talking about work, you're going to be having quite a busy next few months, including 2021. I see that you're the new CEO of the Apprentice South Africa TV show. How on earth did that come about, Magda?
It came about by virtue of the fact that I don't open every email I receive. I prioritize things that are important, and I kept receiving these emails with the Apprentice in the heading. And I've never watched the Apprentice, by the way. I didn't know that Donald Trump was somehow associated.
Yeah, I didn't want to say anything.
Exactly. So I knew nothing about the Apprentice beyond that. And, so I was asked by the producers, and I kind of went, oh, that sounds interesting. And that was an email that I received about 3 months ago. And then I never opened another email. But there was a huge email trail, and they just died in my inbox. And that press release caught me by surprise as much as it caught everybody else. And that's when I reread all the email. That's when I went, oh my God, I need to read the emails.
That's amazing. Well, I'll tell you what, now is a good opportunity for you to rehearse you're fired, okay? So pretending you're firing me, just give me you're fired. Just do this rehearsal now.
You know what? I'm not convinced how I'm going to do this yet. But I have fired my share of people in my career. So saying to someone, "I'm really sorry, you are fired," is not going to be. But I am hoping that we can adjust the way that the Apprentice is structured to be uniquely South African. So rather than looking at what has happened in the US, where they ran the program very much as the big prize is a corporate job, I am hoping that we can persuade the owners, MGM Productions in the US, to allow us to run the program as the prize is actually I will, or Sygnia, depending on what it is, fund someone's business. Oh. So it's not a job, it's funding of your business.
Very good.
And I want to do it is because it opens up the world, it opens up the whole competition to every South African. So it doesn't matter whether you've got a tertiary degree or not. Yeah. If you are scrappy, if you are hardworking, if you are multitasking, prepared to work hard, and entrepreneurial in nature, you can audition. So that's what I'm hoping to achieve through the Apprentice, and skew the program a little bit to be South Africa specific as opposed to kind of European or US based.
Listen, Magda, you've got a very stressful job. What have you been doing to switch off during lockdown? I mean, you mentioned Netflix. So do you watch Netflix? What are you currently watching? What does Magda do to switch off from this crazy world we're in at the moment?
Oh, you're not going to believe it. I get up in the morning and I run on a treadmill for 2 hours every single morning, 7 days a week. And I watch crime series. However rubbish they are, I watch crime series. And that is my way of completely distressing. And then I start my day.
Okay. And your favorite app that you're using on the phone, what is the one piece of technology you could do without? Which app and which piece of technology?
Without or with?
Well, without. What can you do without? That you need desperately. If you don't have this, you can't survive. What is that app?
It's probably my email. Any form of email. That's the way I interact with the world. It's email. But the one I couldn't do without is I've never been a very good cell phone, telephone speaker, but I'm a very good emailer. So, but the one thing I could do without is WhatsApp. I think WhatsApp has been a negative, not a positive, because
That's
whereas
so
email allows you to respond in your own time, WhatsApp is like this thing that just buzzes in your ear where people expect instant response, and they create a sense of urgency, which isn't necessarily there. So if I could discard an app, it would be WhatsApp.
Fantastic. Magda, have you had an aha moment during the last 3 months during the lockdown? Is there one aha moment that you've had?
I think the aha moment has been the fact that we don't have to have physical meetings. We can interact with people all around the world without getting on planes to do so. And in my life, that's a big one. I've spent my life living on planes, traveling between Cape Town, Johannesburg, Durban, London, New York, Philadelphia. So, and all of it has been for meetings. So you spend enormous amount of time. You just waste enormous amount of time, and it's low quality time at airports, traveling, in aeroplanes, in order to get to a face-to-face meeting. And what this pandemic has achieved is it has proven that we can have this interaction and a normal discussion without me getting on a plane. So I think the quality of my life will improve after this pandemic is over.
Well, I hope none of the airline executives were listening to that last bit. Magda Wierzycka, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time and your incredible insights, and may your company continue to grow from strength to strength. We thank you for your time, and we wish you well over the rest of the time of the lockdown. Well, hopefully it ends pretty soon, and let's hope we have a breakthrough on that vaccine that your company is invested in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for chatting to me.